dealing with the situation, I believe if I was any other nationality, it would have been a worse situation, even though everything was done right, if that makes sense. So it was stressful for me, I believe, until the court system found out that it was two people of color involved in the situation. And in my belief, I believe that what kind of took that question out of the situation. So that'll be just a couple situations where I feel the stress of, and also a stress of not really being able to be yourself. And sometimes if you got to take up for people, sometimes people want you to answer questions for all the Black people in America. So you have to. That's a stress by itself of why they're doing this or why they're doing that. I don't know. You may have more answer than me or why they're doing something. So that is a stress right there. But understanding you will gain the experience as time goes, where that may not be a problem when you get more and more experience dealing with different situations. But when you first come in, those situations can add a lot more stress to your job. It can affect you mentally and physically.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it sounds like in the police job, they're not free of microaggressions as any other place. So thank you for sharing
Yes.
that. So Dejan, same question for you.
Yeah, so just kind of to piggyback on what everyone else said, for me, it's a lot of times I think what was stressful for me was I have a heart for helping. And a lot of days, more than not, I felt like when I'm out on duty, I wasn't able to do that. I just wasn't able to help people. And I think it was stressful because I wasn't really finding the path that I could to actually feel like I was making a contribution and why I got into law enforcement. And I quickly learned that you can't help everybody. And I think that was a huge hurdle for me. And it was very stressful, but kind of to piggyback off what Thyron said, talk about being yourself, a lot of times it's you feel marginalized and you feel like you're an outlier and you can't be yourself. And a lot of times that does affect you, and it kind of hinders your learning ability and your ability to perfect the job or perform the job, at a level at which satisfactory is met. So I think once I was able to realize, I could be myself and my perspective does make a difference and it does matter and my voice is heard, then I was able to kind of make strides in that direction. But yeah, it was very stressful. And I think that it could be a thankless job sometimes, but it is far rewarding when you do find those moments where you're like, wow, this 5-year-old girl and her mom were waiting on me while I was dealing with a guy, 1096 guy at the store. And he was being loud and being, belligerent, and they saw how we handled that. And she just stood there, her and her mom stood there, and she just wanted to give me a dap. She wanted to give me a dap. And she said, I like your police car. And, the day was probably the longest day I had on the shift. And that little moment made it all worth it. That little girl just saying, I just wanted a dab and your police car is nice. And, I slept good that night. So yeah, I mean, it's stressful. And a lot of times you may ask yourself why, but then you lean on your why and you wake up every day and put your best foot forward. So.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. Olivia, so same question. Do you feel that your job is, same question as before.
As far as stressfulness, I would say it doesn't affect me as much just because I started out in the jail and, you can't please everybody no matter what you do. It kind of feels like, and even as being, as Thyron said about dealing with, inmates of color and stuff like that, they want you to be their champion, and, you can't do that. You have to do what's right. You have to do what's fair, no matter what. So I guess that really prepared me for the stresses of it more so. I wouldn't say, I think part of the question is, did you notice that you were being treated differently? I don't feel like you know, I've been treated differently. I feel like I get treated as any other officer does. That being a female, you know, that really is, that's probably the more difficult part when you realize that you are being treated a little difficult, because, you know, I roll up to a stop and people see a female get out of the car, and, you know, you can tell by their facial expression, even though they're not going to say it, you know, what's this female going to do? And I think that one of the biggest things is to just push past that and shake off that stress and show them what you're there to do. And, you know, like Dejan said, piggyback on the why when it comes to the students and stuff.
Many of you answered this next question, but I'm going to throw it at Martha, and then if anyone else wants to chime in here too, but I think a lot of you did answer this question. What is the toughest part of the job that a person of color faces? And do you believe that it's harder for a person of color to join the job due to employment bias?
I believe that I actually put my being Hispanic or minority, whatever anybody calls it, on the side, to the side, because first of all, I am a human being with feelings and with a purpose in this life. And whichever child or young person is out there that thinks they can be a powerful force for the goodness of mankind, come on the job, take the test and go with it. It's a lot of stress, like everyone else said. It's a lot of stress, but the satisfaction is enormous. When you see a child, like one example I had, went to Binghamton University, my nephew's graduation, and one child there says, I remember you, your officer Rosario. I used to go and visit you every day when I saw you on your post. And I told that child, I said, young man, you've made my career. Just the fact that at 10 years old, you looked up to me and decided you were going to go forward and go to college and become a teacher, that's huge. And those are the little things in 20 years that we all know that we cherish. Just knowing that we changed, helped somebody's life, changed somebody's life, rescued somebody. It's amazing.
And I know there were things that you had mentioned that have changed, fortunately or hopefully, with the examinations. In the late 70s, the height requirement changed, which allowed more Hispanics to join the police force. Hopefully the exams have changed. There was a story where you shared that the psychological exam had you draw, if I'm not mistaken, you said a house, a person, and a tree. And it was quite biased, the expectations to that test, that if you drew a palm tree, it was expected that a healthy mind would draw an apple tree, a house with a chimney, and a reflection of yourself. The person that you drew was yourself. And you explained that the apple tree was that American, thought, whereas like most Hispanics will often think of the palm trees as the relaxing tree. The house with the chimney, you mentioned that growing up in an apartment complex with a fire escape, that's what comes to mind, but that the psychologists were looking for homes with chimneys because that meant a happy childhood, because it meant Santa Claus came down your chimney. And the person that you had drawn a picture of your brother who you look up to, which could seem questionable. So I thought those were things you had highlighted during the test run. I just want to share with the audience. Is there anything that the journalists would like to share with regards to what you think in terms of joining the workforce or the toughest part of being on the job that you haven't already shared?
Is that question for me? For Martha?
No, that was you. I already basically answered it for you.
Okay.
Okay. So I have a question that I thought would be directed towards Thyron and Martha because of your tenure on the job. How has the social acceptance, I'll start with Thyron, how has the social acceptance and overall landscape of the job changed or evolved since you began, either for the better or the worse?
So the landscape of it's a twofold answer and question. So I believe that it had to change for the worse to get better. So prime example, when I first started, I think I worked a year and we had cameras. We had body cams. We had these little cameras called Scorpion. Well, a lot of people tell fibs, but camera don't lie. So I believe everybody says, what's going on with why is all this terrible things happening? Well, a lot of people didn't have cameras, and I didn't even know that. Like when I heard about all these different shootings that started happening in, I think it was 2005, 2015, coming up when it started getting real hype on social media, and there was no body cam footage. I was shocked due to the fact that we had cameras since 2003 at Fayette County Sheriff Office. We always had cameras. Our deputies, well as jail staff, always had cameras and body mics because we're held accountable. So I believe that the shift had to happen where we could see some of the glory stuff, the horrible things that's happening, so it has to change. So we had to see the people actually abuse power, people get hurt, and things of that nature, so that it could weed out those imposters that is not going in here for good reasons. You know, the reasons to help people, the reasons to help the people that are broke down the side of the road, help the person that's trapped in a car, or be there for you when you dial 911. That's just nothing else, no ulterior motives. We got to get rid of those people. And I believe now that the wool is being snatched off of that behavior, I believe it's a shift. So the shift is this. And we as law enforcement are trying to hold each other to a higher standard. And that higher standard is a shift, and it's more accepting. And that's with laws. And more trainings. Like, for instance, we have this training that we take at the academy every year called Iowa One. And it's about the LGBTQ community. And then we also take trainings at the academy about diversity. When I first started back in 2002, we had nothing of that sort, nothing. And I actually seen a shift. And I give a prime example. It's something called PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act. When I first started that was a joking conversation. Everybody, they thought that was a joke, Prison Rape Elimination Act, and you could only imagine the jokes and things of that nature that happens. But that law came into effect and it hit like a brick wall, because they can actually shut things down. This federal law can. But if you look at the source, it's actually protecting people from being raped and victims and sexual assault. And it's a real thing. And with that being said, I think that we're like me and the brother was talking yesterday, we're getting better, not changing, because you could change for the good or change for the bad. Change, you said yesterday that resonated to me. Change, change is not the word we need. And when this brother said right here, I forgot your name, sir, I'm sorry.
Dejan,
yeah. When Dejan said change is not what we need to get better. That made me think about, wow, quit saying change all the time, because you could change to the bad, or you could change to one of those neutral mind persons that say, I didn't see anything. So if, but let's get better. So I'm believing, whether it's forced, like PREA was, Prison Rape Elimination Act, it was forced. It was put in law that we had to take it seriously. And we as law enforcement, as a whole, correction, we start taking Prison Rape Elimination Act serious. So I believe that the diversity training, things of that nature, we have to take it serious. It has to be put in law. It has to be something that our politicians, our senators, they take a priority and take that to the White House. And it has to come down like the same thing with this sexual assault called PREA. It has to be taken serious, and it has to come down like that law did. So I'm telling you, I went through from 2003, just hearing about this every single year. PREA is coming, PREA is coming, PREA is coming, PREA is coming. And in 2013, when it came, it hit like it hit hard. And I guess the point I'm trying to say is it needs to be that same thing about diversity, holding accountable. It just needs to be that same energy towards solving this problem. And I think that we're getting better trying to solve the problem because we know it's a problem. And I think that's what cameras and having the right type of equipment is doing. It's exposing the wolves in sheep clothing. And that's why I thank God for working at the sheriff office, the Fayette County Sheriff Office, that we're able to have that type of equipment for the last 20 years.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I hear you say the body cams are helping hold people accountable. Laws like PREA that help enact and enforce that the right things are happening. And just when the training in the academy that you mentioned, that these are all things illustrating how things are getting better, how we're working towards always being better, right?
Yes.
Marta, is there anything that you would like to add in terms of what you've seen since evolve or change since you began, either for better or worse?
Well, when I started in the department, it was we didn't have the cameras. Never got involved with the cameras. The cameras are great because it holds the officer accountable and it holds the civilian accountable, because now you're there on film. You can't lie about what you did. The other thing that's new, when I was on the job, the sergeant would carry the taser. I'm not crazy about every cop in heaven having the taser, because the officers have so much equipment, they look like tanks. They have so much to keep track of. I appreciate that there's a taser. The taser actually gives you, I believe it gives you a shock where you have a mini heart attack. That's not something you can play with. And giving the officers so much equipment to try to keep track of, like the poor female cop that wound up shooting the driver, my heart broke for her. There could have been any of us pulling the wrong gun. People say she should have known, the weight is different, your adrenaline is up. I don't know if you can realize in that moment which one you're pulling. That said, the camera also, and the video camera, there are some people out there, like that wonderful young lady at the George Floyd scene, that kept a steady hand and kept recording and had her batteries charged enough where she could capture the whole scene. And I could not believe that the officer, knowing that people are telling him the guy looks like he can't breathe, you're killing him, that he didn't care. I believe that he knew whose neck he was stepping on. I believe that they had beef, or they had problems when they were both working as security off duty. For the officer was off duty at the club. I am almost certain that cop knew whose neck he was stepping on, but I believe that George Floyd did not. And if you guys and ladies remember, as George Floyd was on the floor, he was begging and never cursed. I would have been cursing like crazy. Never cursed at the cop, never said anything but, "Sir, please, officer, please." And as I'm watching the video, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a religious man. This is an educated man. Nothing turned this officer's anger away. And the other officers, they couldn't push him off, but they got stuck with the blue wall, especially the two that were holding George Floyd with their knees to his spinal cord. That we got to see so many aspects of this job. A cruel officer, two officers that were afraid to speak up. The one that the Asian officer that's guarding the scene and keeping himself in check because his right-hand man needed the other officers to be on his side, even though he was horribly wrong. He was actually, he was judge and jury. That was incredible. That was nerve-wracking. That was painful. And this is what's great about the camera, awesome about the camera. And there's a point where you have to stop yourself, think for yourself, and say, how far am I willing to go? When is it stop? When is the stop button come on? You have to, unfortunately, be so pulled together to be an officer. You can do it. You just don't wear that badge. You don't let that uniform dictate your sanity and your decency. And the things that have changed on the job, you're accountable now. And this job is going to become what it's supposed to be: pride, respect. You swear to uphold the law, to protect and defend people.
And it sounds like what Olivia said about having to do what's right, you have to do what's fair. Both you and Thyron mentioned, of course, the cameras and how they're exposing the extra force that has been used on some people. So this next question that came in, and this is for anyone who would like to answer this question. This question came in and said, how can you justify people not abiding by the law enforcement demands? So for example, when an officer tells someone to put their hands up or stay in the car and the person does not listen, why does that get swept under the rug and then immediately look bad on police officers? To me, I feel that if people refuse an officer's demands, then it makes sense that law enforcement needs to make the proper measures to protect themselves. So why do people not get in trouble when they do not listen? Color is irrelevant here. I thought this was an interesting question from obviously a different angle, because here the individual is saying that law enforcement has to use the proper measures when folks are not listening to law enforcement, and that people don't get in trouble when they don't listen to law enforcement. So when I saw this question, there were a few statistics I wanted to look up, and then I'll throw the question again out there to any of the panelists who would like to answer. So people shot to death by US police officers between 2017 and 2021 by race. And this is published by Statista Research Department. It was just posted January 3rd of 2022. It shows sadly that the trend of fatal police shootings in the United States is increasing. There was a total of 880 civilians who have been shot, 113 of them who were Black as of December 2021. In 2020, there were 1,021 fatal police shootings. In 2019, there were 999 fatal shootings. And additionally, the rate of fatal police shootings among Black Americans was much higher than that for any other ethnicity, standing at 37 fatal shootings per million of the population as of December 2021. Another note, Black Americans make up 13% of the population, but are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans, who make up the majority of the population. So in an era in which police are under heightened scrutiny, right? We have the cameras now. We continue to see, to hear, to learn about the unnecessary deaths of unarmed people of color. And there's example after example of the type of racial disparities in police use of force that have garnered national attention. We've got Michael Brown in 2014, the unarmed 18-year-old boy, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, John Crawford, LeVar Jones, George Floyd, Freddie Gray, whose spine was nearly severed when being transported by the police. Breonna Taylor, Amadou Diallo, 1999, he received 42 bullets from plainclothes officers when he pulled out his wallet when they asked him to take out his ID. Philando Castile, these were all unarmed individuals who, most of them, were murdered by the police. And this only feeds into the sad history of mistrust that we see between people of color and the police. And then the parents of these victims now join this harrowing list of parents whose children were killed by police, and others who then view the police with unfounded suspicion. Now, because of those stereotypes and suspicions, we're seeing Black and brown moms and dads teach their sons and their daughters this raft of rules that they hope are going to safeguard their lives. And these are rules and things to live by that students at Upper Iowa have shared within the Student Diversity Union. Things like where to keep your ID card, to keep it on the visor versus the glove compartment, because if you go into your glove compartment, an officer is going to think that's your gun, to never leave your house without your wallet, to don't wear your hood from your sweatshirt. And these are lessons that also deny children the liberty to just make mistakes. So especially adolescents who do ill-advised common things anyway. So I'll just go back to that question. So how can you justify people not abiding by law enforcement's demands? When someone doesn't listen to the police, and it makes sense that law enforcement needs to make the proper measures to protect themselves. What are your thoughts on this?
For me, I think it goes back to the training aspect. And, I think one of the common sayings in law enforcement goes something like, you don't fall to your level of opposition, you fall to your level of training. So in the heat of the moment, flight or flight, what were you trained to do? And I think where the ball gets dropped is when the training lacks in those departments, when you're dealing with uncompliant people. And then, that adrenaline goes up and fight or flight kicks in, and then that's when it's time to make a decision. And unfortunately, I think that's when the wrong decision gets made. And then a lot of people find themselves on the news, like a lot of the incidents you just mentioned. So I think it falls back to the training, and keeping an open mind, and also killing that umbilical of bias that I think still lives in law enforcement. I think it's still here. I would be a bold-faced lie if I told you it wasn't. And I think until there becomes this universal training on all cultures, on all minorities, and in this open mindset and how we police, and it's not just when you look at someone and you classify them as such based off of a bias. I think until we can get through that and understand that some more training needs to happen, like Thyra mentioned, we're going to struggle, and we can't get better if we keep allowing our own counterparts to learn the job a certain way and believe that it should be done a certain way. And I know all of the deputies and officers that are listening today have heard this expression. There's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. And I think there needs to be a lot more spirit of the law rather than letter of the law. And I think sometimes in a lot of incidences, some officers and deputies don't have the ability to police by the spirit because all they know is the letter. And sometimes there's a lack of life experiences and so on and so forth. And that can hinder your performance, I think, on the job. So I think until we can get people to embrace more training when it comes to people that don't look like them, talk like them, sound like them, and ask the question, what happened to you, rather than why this happened to you, I think we won't see it. We won't see things get better until we kind of meet that threshold.
Thank you, Dejan. Thyra and Olivia, Martha, would either of you like to add anything to that?
Well, I'm on.
Yep, you're on.
Okay. So with commands and with giving people verbal commands, the thing I look at is reasonable force. What's reasonable? And I think, like he said, training, but reasonable enough force is if the person's not pursuing or running away or something, that a reasonable enough force is to do the situation to make it safe. A reasonable enough force is, to me, sometimes is, okay, let's get back up here. Let's strategize. We know this guy lives here. If he runs in his house, you know, whatever the situation is, reasonable enough force. I think that's where we got to hang our hats at. What's reasonable to a common person? And everybody force level is different. And then you got to look at the reason. It's a lot of things that go into that equation, a question. You know, who are we trying to subdue? Is he a murderer that killed 5 people that could be armed and dangerous? We can't approach that situation as approaching a situation where somebody feels like their constitutional rights are being violated. And it's a traffic stop, and it's just, excuse my expression, it's a speeding ticket. But we have seen numerous incidents where people get killed. So I say that, you know, when they talk about following the rules and different things of that nature, I grew up in the 80s and 90s in the South, in Florida. And I remember going back from Up our University and getting pulled over by the Georgia state troopers, you know, and getting hit, you know, by them, getting kicked by them, you know, and it was nobody to call. There was no cell phones, there was no cameras on the side of that hot road, all because, you know, they couldn't find drugs. So it's a different rule when you're a person of color when you get pulled over. It's just plain and simple. To this day, you know, in certain parts of the country, the rules are known universally. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Our prime example would be keeping receipts. I got friends that go to the store, they scan their cards, and they never keep their receipt. But I grew up in the back of my head, you always got to have your receipt. Since I've been a little kid, if you buy a piece of gum, you keep your receipt because you don't want nobody accusing you stole the bubble gum. So I think a lot of that plays a factor into, and I'm bringing this around to say about following rules. Like a lot of it be terrified, you'd be petrified of the police. And just like some people class a whole group together, a lot of people class all polices together. If you got a badge, you're bad because they had experience with bad officers. So with that being said, I just think we just have to look at the whole picture. And hopefully the parents tell the people, like my mom, dad told me, just abide by what they say and we'll handle everything else in the courtrooms. You know, and that's why I would tell people, you know, if I had to give anybody advice, just listen to what every officer says, you know, and everything else will be hashed out in the courtroom. Because hopefully, the key thing is to make sure every officer has a camera and every officer is held accountable if they don't use reasonable enough force. What's reasonable to do the situation. Once cuffs get on, once a person is laying on the ground, we got to stop the force. And that's plain and simple.
Yeah, Thyron, those rules that you mentioned, it was just, we had a really interesting discussion with the Student Diversity Union, and we broke into these small roundtable discussions, and students shared rules that they were taught by their parents. And other students just were shocked because they were never told these rules. They don't have to live by these rules. And that, you know, the ones that you shared is really an example of the stereotypes and suspicions and the raft of rules that we have to use to safeguard the lives of brown and Black children. And it's just, it also denies their liberty to make mistakes. Something as simple as one, you know, I'll never forget when my husband walked out of the house without his wallet, and I thought that was insane. You should never leave your home without your wallet, and he never asks for receipts. And both of those are just rules that I understood. So it's very different upbringings and rules, but they're, the why those are necessary, they shouldn't be necessary. So I'm glad you shared that. For everyone here, how have your values, beliefs, and convictions impacted your actions on the job? So Dejan, I know you mentioned in the fight or flight, you have to fall back on your training. For many, right, what helps to build that foundation below that training is also the values and beliefs and convictions. So how would you all say your values, beliefs, and convictions have impacted your actions on the job? And I'll start with Olivia.
Could you repeat that question one more time?
How would you say that your values, beliefs, and convictions have impacted your actions on the job?
My upbringing is different. I was homeschooled as a child. I was adopted into a white family, and all my siblings are also African American. So they really raised us in the values of, everyone's a human being. Respect goes a long way. Hard work goes a long way. Being passionate and having compassion for what you do, even on the bad days. And I think I take those values to every single traffic stop that I do, whether you're white, Black, Hispanic, LGBT. I treat you with the same respect. It's a value that I've had since I was a child. I've had instances where I've had Black students where I pull them over for a traffic stop and they've got their hands, gripping the wheel. And it's just, you got to take that time and step back as an officer and be like, hey, you don't have to do this with me. I know that you're trained and I know that if this makes you feel comfortable, this is what you do. But with me, you don't have to do that. And with any of the officers in Fayette or even in the county, you don't have to do that. I believe that Fayette has some of the most compassionate and heartfelt deputies and police officers, and even the jailers. When it's a bad night and you get taken to jail, they all treat you with respect, all with compassion. I think, some of it's those Iowa values that we have.
Nice, I like that. This
Martha,
is
is there
Martha.
anything you want to add to that? How have your values, beliefs, and convictions impacted your actions on the job?
I was raised very strict. I would follow the law, so it was easy for me to understand how to give that back to the community, how to explain. I love to talk, so I would explain my actions to whomever I was stopping, to whoever I was arresting. I would give them, I would understand, there for the grace of God go I. And when I also worked at Rikers Island for a year, not as a correctional officer, but as a civilian, and got very involved with the prison community. And I would always, like for my prisoners, I would not slam the jail cell door. I would use that tactic to scare the bejeebers out of the person I arrested if they deserved it. Very few times that I have to use that scare tactic of, I'm gonna let you know where you're at. Most of the times, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't crush their ego. I knew sometimes that if an officer arrests 10 guys for one marijuana cigarette, and look how long we've come, arrest 10 guys that were playing baseball on their Saturday off, I knew that this case was like incredible. I don't like drugs. I hate drugs, but abuse of power wherever, no good. I believe that parents do good when they can read a lot to your child. If you can't travel, read about travel, expand your horizons, because that will make you a better human being, that you can deal with people, you can relate to people, and and that's it. I believe in a lot of the parents. Raise your child to respect themselves, to expect respect from others, but to give it, and that's it.
Thank you. I have two more questions, and unless Dejan or Tharwin, you would like to add to that?
I mean, pretty much I would say the same thing. I mean, it's just respect. We had to earn everything. It was earned, and it was only one option. Whatever you were presented with, you had to make it happen. So I think a lot of those values carried over into my professional career, and now my personal life, professional career, and everything. It's just treat people with respect. It doesn't matter who, where, why. Try and see everyone equal. I don't want to sound cliche, but really you never, just don't change. Just be who you're supposed to be. Let your values, your morals, your character carry you wherever you go. You can walk through any door and be who you're supposed to be, and know that that's going to make a difference or an impact wherever you go. So, and I think that for me is how I approach my traffic stops, my calls for services. A lot of my life experiences have allowed me to just take a moment and just think about how this could be better for both of us. It's a terrible situation. No one's ever happy when we're called, but how can I make this moment not so bad for the both of us? So my upbringing has allowed me to kind of take a step back and not just react, but also just take time to process things and then make a decision. So that's all I would say.
Thank you. So I'll double up this question, these last two questions. What is your opinion on the debate with defunding the police? And how do you think we can increase support for the police? So what's your take on the debate for defunding the police? And then if you wouldn't mind adding how you think we can increase support for the police.
May I please answer this question?
Sure.
New York City wants to defund the police. Not good. I believe in more education, more training. I don't believe in defunding the police. I don't believe in taking out the undercovers or the units that go deep under, trying to get information for us so that we won't miss a horrible situation that is being planted, like a sale of guns, we need the officers to be trained. We need the officers to understand that not every Hispanic, not every Black or Asian is a bad person. And we need to train the officers to not believe that every white person is a good person. Each individual case, and treat people, come across, like when you come across someone, you don't expect, you prepare for the worst, but you don't expect it. You don't come out so arrogant, because you'll be able to deflate a situation if there's a human behind that uniform. And no defunding the police. Thanks.
What would you, excuse me, there was, how do you increase support for the police?
I like community affairs implemented into each officer, into their situations, like at the precinct level. Off my foot post in the Bronx, a foot post I had for 2 years, we had a horrible, horrible fire last weekend. It just still breaks my heart because that was my foot post. And I wish that the police department, my old precinct and all precincts, had a system in place where the family that was trying to locate their loved ones to see if they were dead at the hospital or injured at the hospital, that they could have had an officer assigned to take them to the 5 hospitals that the victims were distributed to locate. There was one gentleman that was trying to find his elderly mother and father, going on the bus from hospital to hospital in this cold weather, trying to see where his loved one was and was his loved one alive. So I would like to see community affairs extension on that level, where that's the time where the precinct takes the person by the hand, puts them in a police car or a squad car, and does that community care for that human being. There's so many lives lost. We need the PAL. I told Danielle when I saw the park, the public park that's there in Iowa, in Fayette, that maybe we could start a fundraiser because I think that we have to help the children at the child level. Uniformed, for them to see a uniform officer, or to know that the uniform officer playing basketball at the basketball court with them, that it's a uniform officer, the fire department, that got together and built a park for them and built a facility for them to enjoy being a child, because you're an adult for the rest of your life. So I would love to see in Fayette specifically a PAL, a unit of officers that get together and teach the kids how to play baseball or basketball. For school, maybe on September or whenever school starts in Iowa, in Fayette, Iowa, a giveaway of backpacks. Not everybody in Iowa has the finances to buy a home. If we can distribute backpacks full of notebooks, we started that in New York. Danielle knows that I was one of the people that got on the money with that, and we gave away backpacks with notebooks and pencils and pens and erasers and little book to read. That's an interaction that the kids will never forget, aside from distributing gifts on Christmas like my singing group used to do. The September backpack giveaway has gone on a roll. Practically every precinct in New York City is now doing it.
Yeah. And when she's talking about the PAL, she's referring to, it's called the Police Athletic League. That's pretty popular in New York, New Jersey areas, at least as far as I know. And actually, a lot of those things that she's naming are things that the Fayette Police Department does do. And a few things that she highlighted about Watermelon Days when we did our practice run was how much she loved seeing the police officers there at Watermelon Days with the puppy, with Odin. How they were actually, Chief was showing the vehicle and the inside of the vehicle to kids. And it's just, again, talks to a lot of what the officers have already spoken about, but impacting the youth positively. About getting
the truck and the fire truck.
Yeah, and the fire truck ride around town. Yep. So I will ask then Thyron if you also have what's your take on defunding the police, and also how do you envision us creating increasing support for the police? And just be sure to unmute yourself, Thyron.
So we need to fund the police like nobody business. We need to have police funded for cameras. Technology is always growing, and with that, we have to grow. And wages need to be raised so we can attract the right type of people to work into these jobs, into these careers. Excuse me. A prime example would be with funding the police is where I'm at right now as a jail administrator. And this goes on, Olivia. I know I want to say something about the Iowa values. The Iowa values is the reason why I'm working at the Fayette County Sheriff Office, because the sheriff, Marty Fisher, he saw values in me, and he didn't let the stereotypes prevent me from working my way up. But with that, I believe that we need to fund the police in a lot of ways. And one of them would be also better pay for officers. Another one would be better equipment. There's a lot of underfunded equipment out there that needs to be brought up into the 21st century as a whole in the country, as a whole in the country, but also a lot of training. And I believe this is where Iowa can learn from other states. Like when I'm watching the trials, I always notice about their a lot of police officers' records, and it always in those trials, and I see how much they train. Iowa training for officer is very slim. For instance, jail staff, you only got to train 20 hours. We do more than that in the Fayette County Sheriff Office. But for correction officer, you only need 20 hours a year after you're certified. But we got defensive tactics, got taser training, and plus other training. But you only need 20 hours. To me, that has to change. So I think by defunding the police, you're actually taking away from safety. They can't get the better cars to help save families, the better equipment that they need to help administer aid, because these are first responders. You know, we're going into where, you know, corrections, law enforcement, we're going into where people are running, we're going towards the problem. So you need good equipment. So I just think that's not good at all. And what was the second part of the question?
How do you suggest that we can help increase support for the police?
This is totally on the media. The media has to be part of that. The media needs to, you know, always reporting bad stories. Every once in a while, somebody will get the news or the attention the media get, but we all know how fast bad news spread. The media needs to get on board and push this agenda. It's a lot of officers out there that want to do right. And me and Olivia are, and people that's on this panel that work law enforcement, we're testimonies to that. Northeast Iowa, Des Moines area, Black officers, right, Olivia?
Yep.
That been hired to work at the Fayette County Sheriff Office and Fayette PD in Northeast Iowa. We are a testimony to that. So I think that it needs to be showcased it more in the media, in newspaper, in internet posts, you know, about diversity and things of that nature. You know, if I'm not mistaken, you know, at one time we had so much diversity, we still do at the Fayette County Sheriff Office. You know, we have a lot of diversity, and I see other sheriff office with bigger communities and have a lot more brown and Hispanic people and have less officers than we have at the Fayette County Sheriff Office. And I think that needs to change, you know, and it has to be more accepting when we come in for an interview or when we come in to ask for a job application. You know, you have to be more, I just think, I think that the media has to change the image, you know, not change, excuse me, but get better. The media has to get better. And when the media gets better and start, you know, painting the good officers, upholding the good officers, then the culture will start getting better. So, and it's great officers out there, great officers. And like I said again, we're testimonies of that. What are the opportunities we have reached? You know, I am a testimony of that. You know, I'm a boy I was a man from Wildwood, Florida, coming up our university, and then now is a jail administrator at one of the most respected sheriff office in Northeast Iowa. And I'm proud to be part of that. And I thank God for the opportunity, but it took somebody, you know, believing in you. And I think that need to be uplifted. That need to be shown that look what's happening in Northeast Iowa. Look at this diversity we have.
Thank you, Tharon.
I think,
Dejan or Olivia, do either of you want to add to like what your thoughts are with defunding the police and how to increase support for the police?
yeah, I wanted to piggyback off what Tharon said about the media. I think the media is one of our biggest enemies. For every, you know, few instances you hear about an officer that does something horrible to someone, there's hundreds of officers out there that are doing the right thing. But, you know, media is going to display what they think is going to get the most attention, and, you know, which is the media's job. You know, that's how they make their money. So if they can piggyback off, you know, law enforcement shortcomings, of course they're going to do that, which I think is one of our biggest enemies. But as far as defunding the police, you know, people say, you know, police need more training, they need better equipment. Well, you can't get that to us if you want to defund us. There's so many different things that people don't realize that we do. You know, I go to mental health calls and, you know, domestics and just a wide array of calls that being in a small town, we don't have access always to like crisis intervention team. I am that crisis intervention team a lot of the times. To medical calls, I'm the first face that you see a lot of times. So I think that defunding it is not a good idea. We need all the funding that we can get. And as far as raising support for us, Fayette does a good job of, we go to basketball games and we interact with students. This summer we had a kind of a party in the park thing, and I played basketball in the courts with a bunch of little kids. If I see a kid walking on the street, I'll give them a sticker, high five. I mean, there's certain things, like I remember I went and talked to a 7-year-old kid that was having some issues behaving with his parents. That's stuff that you wouldn't think that officers would do, but I'll take the time out of my day to do that, and so will any other officer.
Yeah, kind of like what Olivia was hitting on, like I think the perception is that we just lock people up. We just go arrest a bad guy, take him to jail, when that's probably a small percentage of what we actually do. There's actually people out there who need real help. And I think if you don't fund the police, it'd be such a trickle effect. It'd be a domino effect of violence, negativity, and more of what we see on the news. So yeah, I mean, to put it short, I just think that would be a huge step backwards to defund the police, because we wear so many hats on duty, and we're not just fighting people and putting cuffs on people and things like that. We're actually helping people in a time of real need, real crisis. So yeah, and I think as far as supporting, yeah, higher wages, whatever, but I think it falls on the training. You got to have the right people out there doing it. Because if you don't, then it's just a circle of nothing. You just, you get nothing out of it. So having the right people do the right job could go a long ways. So yeah, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but it would be a huge step back as far as our country moving in the right direction and getting better, I think. And I'm not gonna sound like a politician or anything, but yeah, I mean, that's just, to me, that's as simple as it is.
Thank you. And for the folks who are online, if you would like to submit questions via the chat box, I do have a question that's coming from Dr. Kata McCarville. Dr. McCarville shared that she heard a radio story that discussed the idea that the police are called for situations that they really shouldn't be, and that there's a need to be to have additional emergency helping services available through 911. So what do you all think about that? I know Olivia mentioned that you've been called on a lot of mental health things. How do you all feel about the need for additional emergency helping services available through 911?
I think it would be helpful, because then it would allow us to tackle the real problems that maybe they can't actually handle, right? So it would be nice for us to kind of focus on why we actually put our uniform on. Not that we can't help these people, but if someone just needs someone to listen to, I would rather have someone more of an expert at that than me, where I'm trained to clear houses and buildings and try and find an active shooter. So I think that would be very helpful. You kind of share the weight, cut the portions equally, if you will, but I think it would be great. Yeah.
In that story, Kata shared that they also suggested that a lot of traffic stops can really be avoided by just sending citations through the mail. So for things like expired tags, et cetera, the point was that something like that, sending citations through the mail, avoiding those traffic stops, could really wind up being safer for everybody. If anyone has any thoughts on that as well. And then she also explained that in that radio show, and this was something that Byron mentioned, the suggestion was that there needs to be additional training to end those situations of like excessive violence, or which usually are after a foot pursuit, with more de-escalation techniques in the training.
Yeah. As far as foot pursuit, I mean, it's God, had my thought and I lost it, but you can't take it personal, right? I mean, yeah, we're here to keep the community safe, and this person took you on a ride, but you can't take it personal. When you take it personal, you get put into a situation you don't want to be in, and you make those mistakes that you wish you never made. So yeah, it's tough. That's why we do the job, because we feel we are up to it, but we're also human. So if I had any advice, it would just be to not take it personal. Obviously, if you feel your life isn't threatened or someone else's life is threatened, then you have to do what you think is best. But reasonable force, reasonable action, those things come into play when your adrenaline gets up and the moment gets exciting, if you will. So.
Thank you. And Martha, just so you know, you're on mute, so you have to press *6 again to unmute. Does anyone have any other questions for the panelists? I know we did get a wealth of questions from the survey, and maybe some of those were questions that you came to this panel with, but I'm looking out to see if anyone has their hands up. Okay, so I do have a question here. Given all of the gun violence and senseless killings, what do the police officers recommend take place to reform people in cities with high crime areas across the country? So what recommendations to reform people in cities with high crime areas across the country?
I'd like to say, may I?
Yes.
Okay. Car stops and disputes, home disputes, arguments between family, two of the worst and most dangerous times of situations for a cop. Just recently, I heard, and I think this week, someone threatened the life of Dr. Fauci. Didn't like his views. And of course, my ears went up when I heard that the guy drove through Iowa to get to, I believe he got to Washington, D.C., because he was looking to hurt or kill Dr. Fauci. So a car stop, you could be in Iowa, and this crazy creep is going through your state, and you wind up encountering him. So a police job is not just state by state, little isolated incidents. Anything can happen on its mission to go and do harm elsewhere. Timothy Mcveigh, another great example, where the officer stopped Timothy Mcveigh after the Oklahoma City building bombing, only because his license plate had come half off. That's the reason the officer stopped Timothy Mcveigh. That's how he got caught. Son of Sam, New York City, traffic cop giving summonses out, gave parking tickets out. When Son of Sam was caught, what got him caught was that parking ticket that was on his windshield blocking the fire hydrant. So little things that mean very little to most people are huge in a cop's life. So we need that, like everyone's saying, the no defunding and more training. And I recommend to each cop, watch the hands, not the eyes. Watch the hands, because the hands are the ones that are reaching for the weapon. And be very, very careful when you make your car stops.
So before we close, does anyone have any advice based on the question that was asked regarding how to help folks in cities with high crime areas across the country?
Well, this would be my personal opinion. So this is not a professional, this is just my opinion on the situation. Just take most places that have the high crime value are places with the strictest gun laws. So like for instance, Chicago, they have the strictest gun laws it is. Washington, D.C. have strict gun laws, and they have a high volume of murder and gun violence. So sometimes I believe that police are here to call after a situation takes place. You know, when we get there, they're expecting the crime or the scene or whatever. So sometimes I believe that if people going into a situation knowing that maybe every other person or every other 5 people have a concealed weapons permit, it maybe change their mind about gun violence. You know, like for instance, down south, you know, in which they have their gun violence down south too. But I just think, to me, you know, it's very, you know, it's very serious about gun violence, but the police are just there to, when the crime happens, they come and 9 times out of 10, they're investigating the crime and you've been a victim. So I think a lot, answer to that is, I think they should allow more guns to be in good people's hands and people can protect themselves, which will make people second think about other gun violence when somebody's firing back. So that's just my personal belief on it. Not talking about uniform, not talking about the sheriff office. That is my personal belief on the situation that, you know, and I know that doesn't make sense to a lot of people. How do more guns make it safer? Well, it's more good people with guns that make it safer.